Good afternoon, Section B. Allow me to start the lecture discussion for this afternoon. We will continue the topic that was initially discussed based on the recorded lecture video that I have provided to you. So let me have a short recap first. In the recorded lecture video I provided to you, I was able to discuss the anatomical structures that composes the nervous system. So we have the CNS and the PNS, and yung autonomic nervous system is under peripheral nervous system. And what comprises here are neurons, okay, mga nerves. And talking about neurons, there are two types, two classes based on their function. We have the afferent and also the efferent. Particularly with efferent neurons, related sa kanila is yung response, knowing that the direction of the impulses being carried by efferent neurons is going to the effector organ, therefore focusing on effects or responses. So kapag autonomic nervous system, since under doon ay mga efferent neurons or mga motor neurons, you will expect then na mga responses yung involved dito. Okay, then I was able to discuss also the difference of somatic versus ANS. So the same with this figure, it tells us the difference of somatic and ANS. And then, sorry if I deleted already the writings, but I hope you were able to understand the concept on synaptic neurotransmission. Okay, it's more on the transmission of the impulse with based on the with the use or with the presence of the synapses. Okay, with the presence ng synapses. Kahit may mga gaps or spaces in between dito sa sa two neuron setup ng ANS, since we have certain events or processes involved sa synapses, the impulse coming from the brain can still be transmitted up until effector organs. Okay? So, talking about autonomic nervous system, I think ako mang na-discuss ang preliminary part ng table na to. And again, just to review quickly, yung first three dyan, na-discuss ko na to, no? By the way, yung una dyan, di ba, this tells us about the origin or the roots of neurons. Ayan, so quick review lang. Sympathetic neurons, they are originated in the thoracic and lumbar region ng spinal cord. And for parasympathetic neurons, they are rooted or originated in the cranial nerves or sacral region ng spinal cord. For the length of neuron, madali lang siyang tandaan base sa base sa length difference ng preganglion and then the postganglion. Okay, for sympathetic, short, long, and then for parasympathetic, long and then short. Okay, and based on that length of neuron, you can also distinguish the location of the ganglion. Okay, kung saan to malapit yung ganglion. Since shorter yung preganglion sa sympathetic, shorter ito yung preganglion neuron ng sympathetic. Located ang ganglion niya near the spinal cord, whereas for parasympathetic, shorter man yung postganglionic neuron, shorter, therefore malapit itong ganglion sa effector organ or target organ. Okay, sige, let's proceed. So done with location of ganglion, we will proceed to the difference of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system based on the neurotransmitter they release or they synthesize. Bago muna yan, review muna natin tong figure na to. Let me assess if you really access no, the pre-recorded lecture video. May I ask, diba there are three parts of synapses, of a synapse. There are three parts. We have the pre-synapse, the synaptic cleft, and the post-synapse. Uh, may I ask if which part of the synapse does SSR of neurotransmitter happens? Yung SSR, synthesis, storage, and release of neurotransmitters. Saan ba nangyayari yung SSR? Yes, very good. Sa pre-synapse. Okay. All the boxes, color blue nga boxes, are the synapse. You have the synapse 1 and the synapse 2. Diba? Ito yung interface or area of connection between two structures. That's how we define synapse. Okay? Now, sa synapse 1, kapag minagnify, di ba natin ito, minagnify yung portion na yan, itong initial, let me change the color. Itong initial, not initial, terminal part ni pre-ganglion, we consider that part as the pre-synapse. Okay? So, pre-synapse yan. Kasi diba yan yung first parte ng isang synapse. Yung dulo ni preganglion, then that is the presynapse in synapse 1. Whereas sa synapse 2, okay, sa synapse 2, ibang kulay na lang, orange, ayan. Sa synapse 2, ang magiging presynapse natin is yung dulong portion ni post-ganglion. Okay, why I am emphasizing this? Recall that the presynapse, itong portion na to, that is where the SSR happens. Okay, sulat natin. Yung pre-synapse, based on the initial lecture natin, diba, SSR happens there. SSR of neurotransmitter, synthesis, storage, and release. Diyan connected yung fourth criterion on the anatomical differences ng sympathetic and parasympathetic. That's why nakalagay dyan, ano yung neurotransmitter release ng preganglion ni sympathetic? Ano naman yung neurotransmitter stored, released sa postganglion ng sympathetic? Okay, so I hope you understand bakit preganglion yung preganglion at saka postganglion ang being labeled there. Okay, to identify the neurotransmitter. Again, it is because the preganglion and the postganglion are considered the pre-synapse, okay, ng mga synapses dito. Okay, doon nangyayari ang SSR. Okay, SSR of neurotransmitter. Okay, let's identify ano-ano yung mga neurotransmitters specifically released kapag sympathetic nervous system. Okay, so it will differ. Number 1, acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is the preganglionic neurotransmitter. And then for the postganglionic neuron, we have the natural catecholamines. And when we discuss natural catecholamines, this includes the following: norepinephrine, epinephrine, and also dopamine. I repeat, these are specific examples of natural catecholamines: norepi, epinephrine, and dopamine. Okay? Now, sa latter portion ng ANS Pharmacology, we will discuss more about this natural catecholamines. So for now, just take note na ito yung mga halimbawa ng natural catecholamines, and yung encircled with color red, yung norepinephrine, that is the principal neurotransmitter. Okay ha? And take note, both neuro norepinephrine and epinephrine, these are considered adrenergic neurotransmitter. Both norepinephrine and epinephrine are termed as adrenergic neurotransmitter. Kaya nga in most references sa pharmacology, no, ang sympathetic nervous system tinatawag din na adrenergic nervous system. When you search about sympathetic nervous system, that's also a synonymous to adrenergic nervous system. Okay? Sige. Now, why is it ang tawag is adrenergic? Bakit siya tawag sa kanya is also adrenergic? Okay, recall. Sinabi ko dito, di ba, na sa postganglionic neuron, it releases one of the neurotransmitter which is considered the principal neurotransmitter, which is norepinephrine. So kung nagre-release yan ng norepinephrine sa sympathetic nervous system, then we tend to realize na it would be norepinephrine ang mare-receive ultimately ng effector organ, no? Ng effector organ, ng organ na mag-i-elicit ng response. So si norepinephrine kasi siya yung principal neurotransmitter. Okay? And ano sabi natin kay norepinephrine? Di ba isa siyang adrenergic neurotransmitter? Isa siyang adrenergic neurotransmitter. That is why once the effector organ receives that norepinephrine, once ang effector organ na-receive niya yung norepinephrine, ang i-carry out na response ng organ na yan is adrenergic responses. No, adrenergic responses. Kasi yung na-receive niya yung neurotransmitter, isang adrenergic neurotransmitter. Okay, so that's the reason why sympathetic nervous system is also known as adrenergic nervous system. Kaya nakalagay dyan sa parenthesis sa taas. Okay, next, let's have the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, take note, both preganglionic, postganglionic neuron, they releases the same neurotransmitter. It's acetylcholine. Kayo na magsulat sa buong word ha, sa notes nyo, it's acetylcholine. Including this one, yung mga natural catecholamines, sulat nyo yung buong word. Okay, buong pangalan. Akin lang yung abbreviation dyan. Okay, sige. Now, if acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter na nare-release ng neurons, parasympathetic neuron, syempre, ang matatanggap na neurotransmitter ultimately ng effector organ would be acetylcholine. So ang i-elicit niya na mga responses would be cholinergic responses. Kaya nakalagay dyan sa taas, cholinergic, yung cholinergic nervous system din ang parasympathetic nervous system. Again, the reason, kasi yung effector organs will also carry out cholinergic responses dahil acetylcholine ang na-receive niyang neurotransmitter. Okay, so that is the rationale why parasympathetic nervous system again is also known as cholinergic nervous system. Okay, so basically, kapag adrenergic, cholinergic nervous system, those terms has something to do with the neurotransmitter being accepted, being received by the effector organ. Okay? Na last difference ng sympathetic parasympathetic based on anatomical differences, anatomical structure, receptors. So magkaiba din yung receptors nila. Or recap natin ulit itong figure na to. So sa figure na yan, Okay. Again ha, receptors. Receptors yung i-differentiate natin. So aalamin natin anong parte ng synapse nandoon majority ng receptor. Sige nga, among the three parts ng synapse, majority of the receptors, yes, are found in the post-synapse. Very good. Okay? So kung found in the post-synapse, kung ito yung pre-synapse, yung labeled with color green for synapse 1, ang magiging post-synapse ng synapse 1 here would be this portion. So parang itong portion na to. And recall that we label that as ganglion. Recall that we label that portion, that aggregation, collection of neuron cell bodies as ganglion. Okay, so yan yung tandaan nyo, yung postsynapse or receiving neuron sa synapse 1, kasi majority of the receptors are found there, yun, ganglion. And then, for synapse 2 naman, ang magiging postsynapse dito is already of course, ang effector gland. Okay, the effector organ. The effector organ. Again, sulat natin, the postsynapse should be the one, diba, should be the one that will receive the neurotransmitter na nirelease ng presynapses. And majority of the receptors are there. So one of the postsynapse is the ganglion, and then the other one is the effector organ or the target organ. Effector organ. Kaya, kung titingnan nyo dyan sa table, balikan natin yung table. Okay. So for a while ha, kay lag. Ayun. O, tingnan yung table. We have the ganglion and then the target organ. Yun yung mga postsynapses. Bakit? Yan yung labeled kasi nandoon yung receptors. They are considered the postsynapses or the receiving neuron. Sulat ko ha. Receiving neuron. Ito naman, sila yung sending neuron. Bakit sending neuron? Sila kasi yung nagre-release, nagse-send, no? Nagre-release ng neurotransmitter. And it is the neurotransmitter, di ba? Yung chemical signals important for neurotransmission. Okay? Sige. So yung ganglionic receptor dito for sympathetic is the NN, that is nicotinic neural. Again, hindi lang sa parasympathetic, by the way. Highlight natin ha. Yung ganglion, both parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, they have the same receptor. They have the same receptor na makikita sa ganglionic neuron. And that is NN. Nicotinic. Ang term niyan is nicotinic. Nicotinic yan ha. Neural. Nicotinic neural. Okay? Receptor. Okay, so again, NN receptor stands for nicotinic neural receptor. So parehas sila, both sympathetic and parasympathetic na receptor na makikita sa ganglion. Now, question, why is it the same? Bakit the same yung receptor sa sympathetic and parasympathetic for ganglion? Okay? It's something to do with the neurotransmitter. Balikan niyo yung neurotransmitter, yung unang sending neuron. Di ba parehas sila, acetylcholine sa preganglion. Di ba? Mula sa preganglion, di ba magre-receive is si ganglion. Mula sa preganglion, yung magre-receive noon is the ganglion. So observe na the same lang, no? The same lang ang neurotransmitter na na-release ng unang sending neuron. Okay? And that is acetylcholine. So saan ba nagbabind yung acetylcholine? Doon sa nicotinic neural receptor. Okay? Now dito sila nagkakaiba ngayon sa second postsynapse, sa second receiving neuron. Okay, na makikita nyo dito sa sympathetic, under sympathetic nervous system, we have the following receptor for effector organ: the alpha receptor, alpha, beta, and the dopamine receptor. These are all receptors, receptors. Okay, and then for parasympathetic, we have muscarinic and nicotinic. So dun sila nagkakaiba sa pangalawang receiving neuron sa effector organ. So taken all together, these are the differences of parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Again, this is based on anatomical structures. Okay, so I hope you were able to grasp these differences based on anatomical criterion. Now, let us proceed to this slide. Actually, lahat ng na-discuss kanina sa table, neural, yes, neural. Tama, sorry. Yes, Mr. Sabio. No, it's neural. Sige. Now, itong slide na to, summary lang to, kumbaga, sa previous table. Okay, summary lang ito. So let's try to reinforce, recall natin. Ano yung difference nila based on anatomical structure? So we have here, diba, sympathetic. Okay, and then below, parasympathetic. Una na very observable difference nila is the length of neuron. Tingnan yung length ng preganglion, postganglion. Diba magkaiba yung length nila? You have short, long, and then long, short. Diba? That's one of the anatomical differences. And then for the neurotransmitter, as you can see sa preganglion ng sympathetic. Sa sympathetic at saka sa preganglion ng parasympathetic, you have their acetylcholine. Diba? Parehas lang sila. Sa unang sending neuron, diba? Sa preganglionic neuron, parehas sila ng nare-release na neurotransmitter, and that is acetylcholine. And then pagdating naman sa postganglionic neuron, dun sila nagkakaiba. Yung pinakita dito is the principal neurotransmitter, norepinephrine. Then for parasympathetic naman, diba, acetylcholine lang. Okay? So again, norepinephrine, yung pinakita dyan for sympathetic nervous system. For parasympathetic, it's acetylcholine. And then with regards to the receptors, okay, similar lang again yung receptor na makikita sa ganglionic. Sa ganglionic, labeled naman siya. Nicotinic, nicotinic. So parehas sila. Okay? So ayan. Sorry if kanang delay masyado yung pag-reflect ng sulat ko sa screen. I'm using the internet connection sa Paseo. Okay? Sige. And then, what else? So, di ba, yung slide na to, reinforcement lang. Ito lang din yung diniscuss sa table. Okay, then for the target receptors, yung target organs ng dalawa, di ba, magkaiba. Magkaiba yung receptors nila. So, you have, for sympathetic, you have alpha, beta, dopaminergic receptor. And then for parasympathetic, you have their muscarinic. Then yung isa, di ba, is nicotinic. Hindi lang sinulat, but nicotinic is also one of the receptor sa target organ ng parasympathetic. Okay? So overall, yan lang yung summary ng diniscuss sa previous slide. Okay, let's move on. Now for this slide, it tells us about the sympathetic innervation of the adrenal medulla. Now let us first define adrenal medulla. Ano ba yung adrenal medulla? Now, ang adrenal medulla, that is a gland. Okay, gland na makikita. Sulat ko ha. Gland located. Okay, very good. No, so it is a gland located in the superior portion, superior part of kidney. Okay? Yeah. Yung adrenal medulla, it is a gland located in the superior part of the kidney. And ano ba yung usually stored sa adrenal medulla? Yes, it's epinephrine. It stores, take note, it stores catecholamines. It stores adrenergic neurotransmitter. Diba? I have mentioned earlier two examples of adrenergic neurotransmitter. We have the epinephrine and then the norepinephrine. Between the two, majority na sinustore ng adrenal medulla are epinephrine. So it stores epinephrine. It stores, sulat ko, majority. Stores majority of epinephrine. Okay, I repeat. Ang adrenal medulla, that stores majority of the epinephrine in the body. Okay. Now for this slide, you will be able to understand how adrenal medulla regulates the release of epinephrine. Paano niya kinokontrol, no, nire-regulate yung release ng epinephrine in the body, knowing na siya yung organ, siya yung gland na nagsustor majority of it. Sige, so suppose, diba this is an illustration of a neuron. Diba that is how I illustrate neuron. So suppose that is a neuron. Particularly, that is a sending neuron. Now this preganglionic neuron, okay, halimbawa, di ba kapag sending neuron, it releases kapag sending neuron, that releases neurotransmitter. Okay, so halimbawa, it releases acetylcholine. Okay? Particularly sa sympathetic to ha, sa sympathetic nervous system. Okay? So sa preganglion niya, recall na ang neurotransmitter sa preganglion ng sympathetic, di ba? It's acetylcholine based sa table kanina. Okay, very good. Now this acetylcholine will then arrive to adrenal medulla. So base sa illustration, according to the path, it arrives no sa adrenal medulla. And regarding adrenal medulla, meron siyang receptor. So makikita nyo, meron siyang receptor. And ang receptor meron, makikita sa adrenal medulla, it's nicotinic receptor. Again, it's nicotinic receptor. Now, kapag nag-bind ang acetylcholine dyan sa nicotinic receptor, that of course causes stimulation of the organ adrenal medulla. Mas stimulate yung adrenal medulla. Again, it causes stimulation of adrenal medulla. Kasi nga, nag-bind na yung neurotransmitter sa receptor, nicotinic receptor. Now, take note, once the epinephrine, okay, again, take note ha, once the epinephrine is released, okay, by the adrenal medulla, it will now be available for action. It will now be incorporated in the blood. Kasi di ba na-stimulate na siya, ano bang meron sa adrenal medulla? It stores majority of the epinephrine. It stores majority of the epinephrine. Na-stimulate man siya, so ang mangyayari, it will release more of that epinephrine. Okay? And kapag na-release yung epinephrine nga sa adrenal medulla, mula sa adrenal medulla, mai-incorporate ngayon yung epinephrine sa blood. Okay, then it will be circulated, distributed, until such time it will reach certain organs in the body, causing or supplying sympathetic effects or adrenergic responses. That is all about sympathetic innervation of adrenal medulla. So yung takeaway learnings nyo dito, yung point dito is, with regards to adrenal medulla, hindi kailangan na two neurons involved. Okay? Di ba yung diniscuss ko lang dito is the ganglionic neuron. Di ba dalawa yung, particularly the pre-ganglionic neuron. Di ba dalawa yung neuron sa ANS, mapasympathetic or parasympathetic. You have the pre-ganglion and then the post-ganglion. Yung point dito is, with regards to adrenal medulla, hindi kailangan na dalawang neuron isang ganglionic neuron lang yung kailangan, which is the preganglion. Ito, yung preganglion na nag-release ng acetylcholine. And then it will automatically bind to the nicotinic receptor found in the adrenal medulla. Then adrenal medulla will then be stimulated. Mara-release na yung epinephrine na sinustore niya. Okay? So that's for sympathetic innervation ng adrenal medulla. Okay, sige, next. Now, since under autonomic nervous system, di ba, we are done with distinguishing the differences nila sa sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system based on anatomy, based on anatomical structure. This time, yung i-discuss naman natin are the differences of the two subdivision, sympathetic, parasympathetic. This time based on functional criterion. So kanina, yung difference na diniscuss ko sa dalawa, based on anatomical structure yon, yung sa table, difference nila yon based on anatomical structure. Ngayon, dadiscuss natin, difference din ng dalawa but based on functional criterion. Okay, ano yung difference nila dalawa? So naay duha categories, two categories na i-discuss natin based on functions nila. We will discuss the general function nila, differences, and then the specific functions. Ayan. Okay, so let's start with the general. Okay. Now, regarding general functions, okay, kapag sympathetic, ayan, nakasulat naman siya, no? Kapag sympathetic, it is also known as fight or flight. Whereas kapag parasympathetic response, nakasulat din, that is rest and digest. Now, take note, ang sympathetic response, that dominates, sulat nyo, dominates whenever we are stressed. Okay, it dominates when we are stressed. So during stressful situation, ito activated. Again, ang sympathetic response, it is the one that dominates whenever we are stressed. And kapag naman parasympathetic response, it is the one that dominates when we are at peace. Okay? Or meaning to say, dili literal nga peace ha, kanang at during our normal nga kanang day-to-day living or during basal condition. Okay. Sige. So, yan po yung sa parasympathetic. It dominates at basal, normal nga kondisyon ng body. Okay? Now, what do you mean by these general functions? Now, I would like to clarify as early as now, kay basin na ay misconception along your end, okay? Basin lahiin yung pagsabot sa difference nila based on function. Now, you may observe na based sa kanilang general function, di ba, it sounds opposite to each other. Opposite yung response ng sympathetic, then parasympathetic, opposite siya. Opposite with one another. Kasi sabi dito, during stressful situation, sympathetic effects yun. During basal condition, yun naman yung parasympathetic. Now, although they sounded opposite with each other, but please take note that they do not necessarily cancel each other's effects. Hindi po sila literal na nagka-cancel out with each other. It does not mean na kapag parasympathetic effect yung dominated during normal basal condition, inactive na yung sympathetic response. Hindi po, mali po yun na concept. I repeat, hindi po ibig sabihin na kapag dominated yung parasympathetic responses kapag basal condition, inactive na yung sympathetic response. Or vice versa, hindi ibig sabihin na kapag sympathetic response yung nagdo-dominate during stressful situation, blocked na yung parasympathetic responses. Hindi po ganoon, no? Hindi po ganoon yung concept dito. Hindi sila nagka-cancel each other's effects. Instead, regarding their opposing effects, it has something to do with the rule of, dito ko na lang isulat, rule of dominance. Okay? It has something to do with the rule of dominance. Kung sino yung magdo-dominate. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, both sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, active sila. Okay, I repeat, ang sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, both of them are active. However, yun nga lang, no, during basal condition, when we quantify, kung gi-quantify na to based on effects, the one that dominates, it's parasympathetic. Okay? So kumbaga mas active nga lang, no? Mas active nga lang yung parasympathetic if it is basal condition. And when the time comes na na-activate ang stress sa katawan, the sympathetic nervous system will shoot up. It will shoot up, dominating over parasympathetic response. So, it's purely rule of dominance. Active silang dalawa, meron lang dominating. Okay, depende sa sitwasyon. If it is stressful situations, or if it is basal condition. Okay, so I hope you understand that. Sige, let us proceed. So that's for general function. Okay, proceed tayo ha. Okay, let us proceed to this table. This tells us about the specific responses or the specific function. So, i-discuss natin this time yung difference ng dalawa based on specific function. Okay? Sige. Now, I've said earlier nga ang sympathetic and parasympathetic, di ba, meron silang yung actions nila, responses nila, it sounded opposite. It sounded opposite talaga. Okay? Now, that opposing effects has something to do with the functions na antonyms with each other. Okay? And it is already your task, no? To for a while ha, babay si Sir Nico. Bye, sir. Okay. Sige, advertise lang sa. Oh, yes. Oh, sige, padayan. Now, again, it is already your task, class, to memorize this table. Okay? It's purely memorization. If you cannot really master the actions, the responses under sympathetic, you cannot answer parasympathetic. Okay, so na ako'y technique to share to you, no? How will you memorize it? Kasi 'di ba, sabi ko nga magka-antonyms lang naman yung effects nila. Magka-antonyms yung effect, halimbawa contraction sa sympathetic, okay? Accelerate sa sympathetic. Sa parasympathetic, it's decelerate. So parang ganun lang yung kumbaga antonyms sa each other yung effects nila. So yung way nyo para mag-memorize, kahit yung sa sympathetic, yung i-memorize nyo. I-memorize yung sa sympathetic effects, memorize nyo siya. Kasi once you memorize it, baliktarin nyo lang para maging parasympathetic effect yun. So, baliktaran lang yung effects. But if kaya nyo naman, no? If kaya nyo namang mag-memorize yung dalawahan, i-memorize mo si sympathetic, i-memorize nyo din si parasympathetic effect, that's very okay. No? Kung kaya nyo talaga, that would be good, ha? So, wala na siya problema sa ako, Okay? Sige, so example, maghatak og example, ha? Just to realize, no, nga, antonyms talaga with each other yung effect nila. So, for example, number 1, pupil. Okay, kasi eyes, no? Kahit mag-extract tayo, pupil. Okay? Now, sa pupil, in the eyes kapag sympathetic activity, that is dilation. Ibahin ko yung kulay, ayan. Dilation. Okay, kapag parasympathetic naman, that is constriction. So, di ba? Opposite. Magka-antonyms lang yung, magka-antonyms lang yung effects nila. Now, we actually have a medical term. Medical term kapag constriction or dilation of pupils. And I think you're familiar with that. Medical term, if dilated yung pupils, it starts with letter M. Ganon din sa parasympathetic, it starts with letter M. No, yung medical term. Kapag constricted yung pupil, ano yon? Constricted yung pupil. Anybody? It's meiosis. Okay, that's a medical term. Okay, tapos kapag dilated naman yung pupil, that's mydriasis. Okay? So yan po yung action, no? Sympathetic versus parasympathetic sa organ pupil. Pupil of the eyes. Okay, next. Sige, let's have the heart, for instance. So, sulat ko, heart. Kapag sa heart, if sympathetic under, wag nyo nang i-memorize. So, yung i-discuss ko lang, no, yung i-memorize nyo, yung isusulat ko, kahit yun lang. Kasi madediscuss ko po yan lahat, specifically. Meron pong separate segment. I-discuss natin yan lahat. Do not worry. Okay, mahaba-haba pa yung ANS kasi. Okay, so, ano lang, yung general overview lang sa kanilang difference. Okay? So, sa heart naman, generally, kapag sympathetic, increase yung heart rate. That's sympathetic. Sympathetic yun. So, kung stressful situation, di ba, increase yung heart rate natin. And then, kapag naman parasympathetic, decrease heart rate. Meron din tayong medical term, di ba, kapag increase heart rate, decrease heart rate. Ano kapag mataas yung heart rate? Taas heart rate. It starts with letter T. Anybody? Yes, it's tachycardia. Okay, very good. And kapag naman parasympathetic, that's brady. Okay, very good. Bradycardia. So, baliktaran lang, no? Purely baliktaran lang. Next, itong sa blood vessels, medyo mahaba kasi ito. Meron akong separate segment nga madadiscuss natin all about artery. So for now, utang ko muna yung about sa effects ng sympathetic effects, parasympathetic effects ng arterioles or arteries. Meron tayong specific or detailed discussion on that. So sa separate segment na still under ANS. Okay, still under ANS. Sa latter part na yan ng autonomic nervous system. Okay? Sige, proceed tayo sa glands. Okay, dito tayo. Kasi dito nakasulat yung glands. So, paki-erase to, then just refer to my writings, no? Ayan. Okay, regarding glands, okay, we have different glands, no, na nag-elicit ng sympathetic or parasympathetic responses. Let's have, for example, lacrimal gland, salivary gland. Okay, these are glands. Now, kapag sympathetic response or activity, there is inhibition of secretion. Okay, inhibition of secretion. So instead of may pagluluha, inhibited man yung pagluluha, so walang tearing na nangyari. So that's dry eyes, no? Dry eyes. Okay, for lacrimal gland. For salivary gland, sympathetic activity, related dito yung dry mouth. Kasi inhibited nga yung secretion, dry mouth. Ayan. Okay, next, for parasympathetic, baliktarin natin. For parasympathetic naman, kung inhibited yung secretion dito, watery secretion. Okay, so for salivary gland, may pagluluha, no? May tearing, may lacrimation. Okay, lacrimation sa lacrimal gland, may tearing, pagluluha. Ayan. Kapag naman salivary gland, there will be salivation. No, salivation. Another gland, pwede din dito yung sweat glands, no? Nakasulat dito yung sweat glands. Okay? Now, sa sweat glands naman, parehas sila actually sweating. Mapasympathetic or parasympathetic activity. Sweating, sulat nyo, then dito din, sweating. Okay? Ang pagkakaiba lang nila is that they differ on what particular sweat gland. What particular sweat gland being mediated by sympathetic versus that of parasympathetic. Tandaan nga kapag sympathetic, we have the apocrine. Ito yung spelling. Apocrine. Okay? It's the apocrine sweat gland. Okay? It's the apocrine sweat gland, yung nagme-mediate or mediated, yung being mediated under sympathetic response. Kapag naman parasympathetic, it's the eccrine. Okay? It's the eccrine gland. Okay? Now, saan ba yung located yung mga glands na ito? Saan located yung mga glands, sweat glands na ito? Okay, kindly take note for apocrine sweat glands. Ito yung located halimbawa sa palms, okay, and sa soles. Okay, sa paa. Palms and then yung soles sa paa. Okay, so generally, isipin nyo kapag yung nagdo-dominate na pagpapawis ay sa palms ng kamay and then sa soles ng paa, that is sympathetic sweating. Sympathetic sweating yon. Whereas kapag naman parasympathetic, generalized ito nga sweating. Generalized sweating. So kumbaga, general sweat glands ng katawan. Okay, halimbawa sa likod. Di ba, very common yan. Sa likod ng katawan, sa braso, sa hita, sa armpit. Yun, nandoon yung mga eccrine sweat glands. So in short, kapag nagpapawis yung buong katawan, no, kapag buong katawan, that is parasympathetic. Okay? And then kapag naman sympathetic, localized lang, localized. Okay, yung sweating. And very important, no, yung sweating sa katawan. Very important yan. Kasi 'di ba ang sweating in the body, important yan to maintain body temperature. Sulat nyo ha. Importante yan for thermoregulation. Okay? Kung dili ka gapanington, magpa-check up na gyud ka. Okay? Importante yung pagpapawis sa katawan. And that would maintain normal body temp natin, maintaining body temperature, thermoregulation. Okay, next. Balik tayo sa slide na to, yung first table. Excuse me. Ayan, let's have bronchial smooth muscles. So this time, mga smooth muscles naman. Smooth muscles yan, smooth muscles. So we have different smooth muscle organs, no, sa katawan. Halimbawa, the bronchioles, the bronchular smooth muscle, the GIT. Ayan, the GIT. And then ito din, smooth muscle din to, nasa next slide, the urinary, no, urinary bladder. Okay, let's have first bronchial smooth muscle. Okay? Now, yung effects nila, ay, isahon na lang nako ha para madali yung discussion. Yung tatlong smooth muscles na yon being mentioned, the bronchial smooth muscle, the GIT, and also this one, the urinary bladder. Yung effects nila may kinalaman sa tone. Yung effects nila again, ayan, may kinalaman sa tone. Okay, tone ng smooth muscle or pressure sa smooth muscle. Okay? Again, yung actions, yung effects ng sympathetic and parasympathetic on these three organs, it has something to do with the tone or pressure. Now, when we say tone or pressure, that simply tells us that if increase yung tone, okay, in general, what happens is contraction of that smooth muscle. Diba? Kung increase yung pressure sa smooth muscle na yan, there will be contraction. Okay, generally speaking. Kapag naman lesser ang tone, decrease ang tone, opposite, that's relaxation. There is relaxation of that smooth muscle. Okay? Again ha, I am referring to the overall, the ultimate effect ng lahat. Okay? Para paspas ra ang flow. So take note. For bronchial smooth muscle, ayan. For bronchial smooth muscle, and even, no, even sa GI tract, GI tract, and urinary bladder, kapag sympathetic, tandaan nyo, there is decrease of tone. Nakuha? I repeat. For sympathetic action, response ng bronchial smooth muscle, GIT, and urinary bladder, decrease yung tone ng smooth muscle. Decrease ang tone, so ang mafi-favor, relaxation of that smooth muscle. So ano yung magiging realization nyo kung relax ang bronchial smooth muscle, for instance? Is it dilation or constriction? Bronchodilation or bronchoconstriction? Okay, very good. Kasi diba, decrease yung tone, mafe-favor ang relaxation, there will be sulat niyo dyan, under sympathetic yan, bronchodilation. Sa GI tract naman, ganun pa rin ha, decrease yung tone sa GI tract. Relax, no? Relax ngayon ang GI tract, yung stomach, yung intestine, relax. So walang, kumbaga, digestion na nangyayari kasi relax man yung muscle. Okay? Therefore, what happens to the sphincter? Ang sphincter po kasi, that is the, kumbaga, opening, yung, kumbaga, nag-o-open ng muscle para mag-release ka ng waste. Okay, mag-release ka ng waste from GIT, mag-release ka ng waste sa, urinary bladder. Yun yung sphincter. Okay, yung hole, yung opening. Okay? Ngayon, kapag relaxed ang GIT, sarado yung sphincter. Sarado ha, sarado yung sphincter, close. Kasi nga, relax yung GIT. Wala naman siyang ilalabas kasi relax yung GIT. Okay, so reduce yung muscle tone ng stomach, reduce yung muscle tone ng intestine. So my question here is, will the contents from the stomach and intestine move or not? Will it move or not? If it is relaxed, okay, not. Kasi nga walang pressure. Mababa yung pressure sa GIT. Therefore, what would be the appropriate activity under sympathetic? Is it constipation or bowel movement? Okay, very good. It's constipation. No, it's constipation. So sulat nyo dyan for GIT under sympathetic, constipation. Kasi di ba relax man yung muscle tone ng stomach, muscle tone ng intestine. So walang ilalabas, constipation yun. Okay? Opposite yung sa parasympathetic. By the way, regarding constipation, yung overall or ultimate effect din dito, pwede nyong i-relate dito yung term nga ileus. Okay, ileus. There is loss of peristalsis. Okay, loss of peristalsis. Okay? So kumbaga there will be retention, loss of peristalsis meaning hindi active ba yung walls muscles ng intestine. Yan. So loss of peristalsis. So there will be retention of contents sa GIT, resulting therefore to constipation. And diba yung antonym ng constipation, that is diarrhea. So sulat nyo dyan, diarrhea, or that is Tama ba yung spelling? Okay, diarrhea, or there is increased bowel movement. That is bowel movement. Okay? So kapag increase yung bowel movement, then yung magiging realization natin is there is greater tone, no? Greater yung tone sa ayan, sa smooth muscle ng GIT. Kasi there is mayroong diarrhea na nangyayari, increase yung bowel movement. So greater tone, that will tend to move the content in the GI tract. Okay? Kaya may ilalabas siya. Kasi, again, greater yung pressure no, sa GIT, smooth muscles. Sige, let's proceed to urinary bladder. Okay, you tell me this time ha, kasi 'di ba sabi natin urinary bladder under sympathetic activity, decrease man yung tone, so ma-favor yung relaxation. Okay, that's for sympathetic. Parasympathetic, increase yung tone. Okay? So, what do you think? What do you think will be the sympathetic activity sa urinary bladder? Is it urination or urinary retention? What do you think? Is it urination or retention? Yes, urinary retention. No, retention. Okay, very good. So that's the sympathetic activity for urinary bladder. Kasi nga relax yung tone, yung pressure sa urinary bladder, retained yung contents. And opposite, urination naman dito. Okay, again, the reason kasi greater yung tone kapag parasympathetic activity for urinary bladder. So please take note of this. Sympathetic, parasympathetic responses sa smooth muscles, bronchioles, GIT, urinary bladder. Okay? Next, meron pa mga nakasulat dito. Ito, yung sa penile tissue. Okay? Tissues. For sympathetic, take note, there is ejaculation kapag sympathetic. Erection naman kapag parasympathetic responses. So yan yung difference nila kapag penile tissue, yung involved na organ. Next, for uterus. Ayan. Ito din, uterus. Kung titingnan nyo, only sympathetic activity response yung meron kapag uterus. Okay? So take note, we only have sympathetic responses, which is relaxation of uterine muscle. Okay, yan yung sympathetic activity for uterus. And we have actually a medical term that tells about relaxation of uterine muscle. Uterine muscle. So yung term natin dyan is tocolysis. Okay, that's the medical term. Kapag relaxed yung uterine muscle, yung uterus. Again, tandaan, walang equivalent parasympathetic response. Now, for this part here, ayan, you can just read this, yung metabolic functions, difference ng sympa at parasympathetic based on metabolic function. Just read that. Although na-discuss ko naman yung processes na to, I hope you can still remember, no? Gluconeogenesis, glycogenolysis. Yes, sa biochemistry ko yan na-discuss. Okay? Although, madadiscuss din naman natin siya, but it's not part of Pharmacology 1. It's part of Pharmacology 2. No, yung mga endocrine system. Dito kasi sila mafo-fall. But if you wanted to read about this, memorize, okay din yun. Basta under sila sa sympa, no, sympathetic activity. Okay, so overall, these are the differences ng sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system in terms of specific functions. Okay, so that's the end ng ANS na kumbaga para siyang overview sa kanyang subdivisions na parasympathetic and sympathetic. Okay, kasi again, merong separate segment na talagang detailed yung pagdadiscuss natin sa mga actions nila kasi ipapasok natin yung mga gamot. It's very important, di ba, that you understand the physiology first so that it would be easily to you to appreciate the action of the drugs. Okay? Sige, we still have, oh no, we don't have time na. Okay lang ba nga continue or mag-koan or mag-stop na ta on this slide? Sige, 5:30 naman tataman. Tama ba? 5:30 ra tataman? Yeah. Yes. Sige. Gusto pa daw si Sabio. Unsa naman? Sige, so unsa man? So okay ra nga mag-end ko or magpadayon ta? Sige. If kuan mag-end na, let me see a heart reaction if mag-end na. If padayon pa, then let's have a like nga reaction. Yes, of course. Part 1 and part 2. Ang part 2, part 2 nga ANS pharmacology is until there is a cholinergic transmission. Sige. Padayon ta. Ayun sa man, gikapoy na mo. Or ihatag na ako ang recorded video. Gikapoy na si ma'am. Sige, yun sa man. Wala ko'y camera. Akong laptop kay wala'y camera. Si Sabio raman ang gatubag. Unsa naman mga students. Video na lang sa siguro. So unsa man, video na lang inyong gusto. May I have reaction? Kanang reaction daw, ay, heart biya o. Pag heart pud mo kung gusto mo o video. Ay, okay. Sige. Sige. Yung video na lang tano. Sige, go. So, ano na lang. Ito naman pod. Kana siya. O, kana ra nga slide. Kana. Okay. Yes. Uy, first time ko mag-discuss online nga nasa Paseo. Okay, sige. So, atong i-discard ni. Ayan. So, hanggang dito lang, cholinergic. Ito po yung cholinergic style. Naman may PDF handout, no? Yan, 1. Ayan. So, 1, 2, 3. Okay ba yun? 1, 2, 3. O, diba? Gamay ra. O, diba? Gamay ra. So, maghatag ra ko og, sige, recording. Sige. So, I will now dismiss the class. So, thank you. Thank you for listening. And hopefully, sunod, face-to-face na po. Pero murag mas ganahan mo og kuan online. Sige. So, ingin na lang ko kung sa inyo hang prefer na pod next time. Ma-adjustment pod na to na. Sige. So, thank you everyone for listening and bye. Thank you. God bless.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you so much. God
Sige, sige,
bless.
sige, sige. You're welcome.